Success transcends cities. As one of the world's most respected business leaders, I know what it takes. Join me now as I sit down with fellow leaders and we share our insights into how you can be successful. My name is Jeffrey Hayzlett, and this is All Business.
I've always said that a brand is nothing but a promise delivered. Our guest today is part of a brand that's been in existence for over 100 years, and they've certainly delivered on those promises. Throughout the decades, their focus has been directed towards supporting small businesses by partnering with them to create a more efficient customer service approach. Taryn Raymond is the Chief Marketing Officer at FTD, and she brings extensive experience in global marketing, customer analytics, and e-commerce. Welcome, Taryn.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to chat.
It is exciting. So you've now been the CMO of a brand that has stood the test of time for 110 years plus. To what do you attribute that longevity? And I'm going to assume that you've not been there that as long as 110. I'm just going to take and make that the bet.
No, I've been there a little over 2 years. So yeah, it's been really exciting. I mean, we were the first in the space to do what we do. So a little background in the business. So what we do is you come to either FTD or proflowers.com, you place a floral order that gets routed over to the local florist. They fulfill the arrangement and then hand deliver it to the recipient. And we do more than just send these local florist orders. We do marketing on behalf of them. We power their POS systems, their websites. I mean, you name it, we're kind of providing anything that they need for their business to be successful.
Are they franchises or licenses or just associated with you?
No, they're just really associated with us. They're kind of a part of our membership. So it's similar to a franchise model, but not necessarily the same.
Now, when I say 110 years, I was looking through some of the history of the company, and I know some of your competitors, and you guys have been around a lot longer than them. But you were like telegraphing orders from way back when, right? I mean, talk to me about some of the history, because when you think 110 years and this is FTD, and, you know, I walk into my local shop and I pick out that bouquet, or maybe I'm calling in it or looking on the website, right? So tell me back 110 years ago, how did you do it?
That's exactly right. It was via telegraph. So they were sent via telegraph. It actually started with a very small group of florists who thought, you know, we should figure out a way to be able to share these gifts further than just our direct area that we're able to service. So they did it via telegraph. They sent it, and just it continued to grow from there. And now, as you mentioned, I mean, we have a significant coverage throughout the US and then also internationally. And we just continue to power these small businesses in such a wonderful way that they want to be a part of our network to be able to help them succeed too.
I got to tell you, years ago, my daughter did some phone work for one of your competitors where she was on the customer service during the peak season. And I can remember one guy calling in and ordering flowers for 6 different women on Valentine's Day all over the country. So I know you reach further than that, and hopefully you're doing it for some really good people. But back in September, let me tell you, you took a very creative approach to rebranding. You focused on more meaningful giving. What was the honest of that rebranding?
So prior to our rebrand, if you took a look at FTD.com or proflowers.com, they looked very similar. They were almost essentially copy paste of one another. And we really weren't speaking to this heritage and to this empowering small business that we just kind of discussed on the FTD side at all, which is really where it all began. So we wanted to make sure to bring that heritage to life and have that execute in all of our marketing, and really give our members the light and like the attention that they need. I mean, they're doing such incredible work. So we wanted to bring that forth. And then we also wanted to differentiate the brands. So on the Pro Flowers side, we're a bit younger, brighter. We call it the fun side of flowers. And then FTD, like we've been talking about, is more about, this meaningful giving and really tapping into your local flora network in order to do that.
I'm kind of curious about what are your metrics for being successful with the branding?
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of surveying to try to understand like consumer reaction, a lot of brand. So what is our brand traffic when it comes to search terms, and then also direct to site SEO, trying to track how that has grown since the rebrand. Another thing that we've really been measuring, because with the rebrand came a lot of new products as well, and really trying to, again, differentiate the product sets between the two brands, and then just kind of getting fresh new items for within the assortment in general. So we do a lot of on-site tracking to be able to understand how those are performing versus, what we would traditionally send. So we're digging into data a lot to kind of understand how this rebrand is coming to life. And so far it's been really successful, which is great.
I love it that a flower business is getting into data. That's pretty cool. So when you said you joined 2 years ago, did you join before March of 2020, before the pandemic, or right after it started?
April of 2020. So I started remote in the middle of COVID, which is definitely an interesting time to start.
Did you even get a chance to meet some of the team?
Not for at least a year, which was wild. I mean, I had worked with some people previously and, obviously all met virtually, but actually meeting my team in person didn't happen until at least a year later. So, I always say that was one of the that's one of the hardest parts of starting this new role, was kind of getting everyone to shift into this new mindset of working digitally. And just being able to trust this new face on the screen, that's kind of coming in and changing the world a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts when you have to do that. Now I'm traveling around the country very often, a lot more often than I used to, actually. And now I'm running into people I hadn't met ever until I just met them over line, and now I'm meeting face to face. So it's really cool. Yeah. So we know that the pandemic blew up every notion that we had about running effective marketing campaigns. I mean, it just changed everything. In fact, if you remember back then, a lot of companies were running some old stuff and they were getting crap about it because they would still show people walking into restaurants in their restaurant. They don't do that anymore. So the old ways have to be out, so to speak, but is there something from the old tactics that remain and can be used in this new system? What did you keep from the way you were doing it before into this new way of doing it?
So I'd say, we did make a lot of changes when it comes to messaging and, to your point, what we were showing during the pandemic. As far as things that we kept, we're very occasion heavy, we're gifting. So we want to make sure to speak to those top occasions appropriately, which we just continued to do during the pandemic. And then I think what's interesting is I feel like a lot of old tactics are now new again almost. So linear and connected TV had a boom during the pandemic, just, for obvious reasons that we were all watching a lot more TV than we probably were previously. So we've continued to invest there and find that to be successful channels for us. We also saw that there were just different shifts in like social media trends. So for example, TikTok. So we kind of shifted along with that and tested in there as well. And then I'd say anything like old that's new, data, like being very, very data heavy. So with the cookies going away and being able to target and track people in a cookie world, collecting as much data as you can about your consumers has become even more so important. So I feel like that was very much an older tactic that now is just research, like becoming even more important.
So I'm just curious, are you using any kind of influencers in your marketing campaign?
We are. We do work with some influencers. And we do a bunch, within either Instagram or Facebook, but a lot of influencer tactics.
Are they making content? Is that what they're doing, is primarily providing content?
Yeah, they're making content for the most part. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I loved what you had to say about linear digital TV, because obviously we own C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio, and here we are doing it right now. Consumer behavior has been real interesting to predict. You've had extensive experience in the customer analytics. You brought data up a couple of different times. What's been the most surprising things that you've had regarding customer behavior from that data?
I feel like in every role, there's always these like little nuggets that I find really interesting with the consumer base. In this current role, I think I've found what's been really interesting is you just assume that a consumer is always looking for the cheapest item, and that's not necessarily the case. If you have something that you've built based off of data and knowing what consumers really enjoy, we actually find that they'll kind of opt into a more expensive version of that item that we've sort of catered to that audience that we've been targeting it with. So I always just find that really interesting, because we just assume that they need a promotion or a sale to be able to kind of get engaged, but that's not necessarily the case as long as you're looking at the data appropriately and targeting them.
So what do you think the next big thing will be to predict about how to serve your customers better?
I think I think it's really again, like capturing as much data as possible to really understand what it is that they're doing. Without being able to rely on cookies and AI can certainly be helpful, but I think being able to understand activity on site and what's attracting a consumer, where the most activity and conversion is happening, I think that's going to be the best way to really be able to cater to them.
Do you think the analytics is helping you create more engagement and keep up with the demands of your customers?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we have a wonderful analytics team, and we're very data driven at this company, and we want to be able to go into a meeting and say, like, we know this is going to work because of X, Y, and Z. We also very much have a test and learn mentality, so there's no bad idea. Let's throw it out there. Let's see if we can put it into play and test it against what we're doing currently, because you don't learn unless you're doing something like that. So between those two things, yeah, I think it's absolutely important.
So back when I was the CMO of Kodak, when we were selling inkjet printers and getting in that market, we called the heavy users. We had heavy users, that were the real people that used a lot of ink, 5 times more ink than anybody else. Do you have those kind of heavy customers in your business, and what do you call them?
We do. So we have a loyalty program, so we kind of bucket them within that. That's where we see the most activity. But we do have different customer cohorts that we'll use within our targeting. So we have our heavy users, we have our sort of not as engaged users, sort of that middle ground, and then lapsed. And we kind of use those 3 cohorts within our marketing in different ways to try to re-engage.
Well, this question just came in from one of our fans and one of our members in the C-Suite Network, Tom Schmidt, down out of Oklahoma. He asked, how is the quality of the florist measured to keep quality consistent from florist to florist across the U.S. and probably even Canada, I would assume? And I know you're operating in a lot of other countries. So is there any criteria used to determine if a florist qualifies to be a part of the FTD family?
So we do, yes. So we do monitor their how successful they are in replicating the different arrangements that we're sending to them. So we do that in a variety of ways, both within NPS as well as within just understanding like consumer feedback. We also, what we do and to try to mitigate any issues too, is we provide them with a ton of information on how to actually build the different arrangements, and then any substitutions that they may need. So for example, if they're out of roses, what can you put in instead? So we try to mitigate anything in advance, which we've found to be really successful, and they totally follow it as well.
Now, I used to do a lot of TV shows where I interviewed some businesses. One of those was Dunkin' Donuts when I was on Bloomberg. And they used to get up in the morning and kind of watch things, and they could predict what the customers were going to do based on weather. So I have to ask you about supply chain, because with the current supply chain issues, are they affecting the business at all?
It is, yes. I think we're kind of being affected. I think all businesses are affected in some way right now. What happened, I mean, during COVID, they stopped planting flowers for a brief period of time because of everything that was happening. So there, that of course kind of created this little bit of a ripple effect in demand or in supply when it comes to the different flowers that were halted. And then there's also a glass shortage. So that affects anything from like a vase perspective too on our side. So there are things that we've been able to figure out solves for, and we're definitely like working towards ways to make sure that it's mitigated. But yes, those are 2 things that have come up because of the pandemic.
I mean, who would have thought stop planting flowers and we don't have enough glass? So yep. I guess you're just going to give it to them in papers and repurpose one of those glass vases, I guess, or vases. Which is it, vase or vase? I
say vase, but I think we could go either way.
If you say vase, you could charge more for it. I think
it sounds fancier.
So you have extensive experience. I always love to look at the CMO's background and the background of all of our C-suite executives that come on the show. We've had so many of them, and the pedigree is always interesting. But I look at your experience in e-commerce and optimizing digital channels. What do you think is the biggest mistakes businesses are making with their digital channels?
I would say only looking at last click conversion.
Say that again. Only looking at what?
Last click conversions.
There you go.
So only looking at that last click metric, there's so much more that goes into marketing and the different effects on different channels when you're playing, especially if you're playing in the upper funnel and what that means to drive lower funnel performance. I think it's just not effective when you're just looking at those who click through an ad and purchase right away. There's so much more that happens from a click or even a view of an ad to then someone converting. And especially it differs by brand too, and different types of industries, how long that intention window is. So I think that's probably, I go with that. It's probably the biggest mistake.
Well, and consideration, I think, is a big part of it. Even getting into, a lot of digital marketers only look, and we get that with advertisers on C-suite radio and C-suite TV. They want to know what the CAC is, cost of acquisition, and what's the click rate, and being able to see that they can convert. We're all about, but you got to have, discovery. You got to have reach. You got to have consideration. So do you divide the budget up into different areas for brand development, for discovery, for reach, and then conversion?
Exactly. Yep. We have different buckets that we play with, and not to say that there aren't goals associated to them. There absolutely is. And there's just different goals per area of the funnel that we're focused on, because the goals different. So we just want to make sure that we're doing that. The KPIs are set appropriately. And we do a lot of different holdout groups and things of that nature to understand lift and kind of be able to set those KPIs within the different funnels too. So we've found that to be a successful way to do that.
Which mediums are you finding to be the most successful right now?
I think the traditional channels are still big ones that we're spending money on. So when it comes to social and Google and paid search, but I think some of the new ones that have been surprising for us. So TikTok has been a surprising one for us, honestly. And then we're actually seeing a lot of success in what I mentioned earlier in the TV world, both linear and connected, and radio. So I think radio has always been one that we've found to be a tougher one to crack, but we're finding it to be more successful now as we continue to test into it.
How about podcasts? Are you doing anything with podcasts at all?
We haven't done a ton. It's definitely something that I think I want to tackle next. So, yeah.
I find it funny you say traditional and then you go right to digital. You didn't mention anything about print or, old TV or any of that stuff, but we'll go beyond that. I get where you're coming from, which is great. So talk to me a little bit more about the content marketing, because, I keep telling everybody right now, if you're a company, you need to be a media company. You need to start really creating a lot of content. Social was so 2000s, and now it's really about, engaging people with great content. How are you putting content campaigns together?
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of content when it comes to what you said with social. We also have blogs that we do a lot of content within, and they get a ton of traction, which is great. And then we're really just we're working with different partners as well to really push out our message, developing content with them. The influencer piece is also very much a content pull too. So we're trying all these different areas. So some of it's copy-based, some of it's image-based, but we're really trying to get as much as we can out of those different partnerships, and it kind of boils down to content.
We'll have to help you start a flower TV channel or a podcast, talking about how it makes people feel. I can imagine, when I was at Eastman Kodak, I always talked about emotional brand. It was an emotional brand, that Kodak moment. My predecessor actually had let the trademark for that Kodak moment expire, and I brought it back saying, look, you have to have that emotional connection. How do you show that emotional connection with your product?
We do that a lot within our marketing. So we really try to capture that moment of both the giving and the receiving of the item. I think that's really important. And to your point about being emotional, I mean, our brand is being gifted at some of the saddest times, but then also some of the happiest times. So we have to try to sort of find that balance in showing those different emotions to our consumers for them to think of us in those moments. But yeah, I think we find that to be incredibly important in everything that we're doing.
No, you're not really a franchise, but you got memberships. You got this big partnership, I guess the best way to be able to say it. And you've got all these folks coming together. How do you get feedback from those owners of all those 30,000 plus locations? How do you get that feedback and use that in your campaigns?
Yeah, so we meet with them monthly. We meet with new members monthly, and then we're meeting with some other members actually on a quarterly basis. So we're actually chatting with them. We have one-on-one conversations with them to really understand how it is that they're feeling about what it is that we're providing them, as well as like what they're seeing in the space when it comes to marketing. So we work very, very closely with our members to make sure that we're doing that.
When you say members, are they really your customers, right?
I mean, they're our customers in a sense, but we really try to treat them as business partners too. I mean, they're out there, they're seeing the trends, they're working directly with customers who are going into their stores as opposed to ordering online. So they help us too, just as much as we're helping them.
So I mentioned that every company should be running themselves if they were a media company. Do you think that's one way to win in this digital race we all seem to be in right now? And then what strategies should organizations use to gain ground?
Yeah, I mean, I love media, so I'm a little biased, but yes, I do think it kind of should be run as a media company. I think it's for one reason, because it's just moving so quickly. I mean, everything just keeps changing, so we have to get ahead of it. So if you're kind of hyper focused on that and hyper focused on like understanding what's going on, you almost become this media company. So I do agree with that statement.
That's cool. When your CEO comes in and you run into him, her, I don't know if it's him or her, but run into that person in the hall, what's the first question they normally ask you?
Oh, I mean, usually, and it's a him. So he will usually ask how we're doing when it comes to optimization, like where are we putting more money, what channels are we seeing succeed, and we're on that on a daily basis. I mean, my team is incredible at like keeping their finger on the pulse and understanding. All right, we're really succeeding over here. We should be throwing more budget here. So it's just making sure that we're in it live.
That's interesting because maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago, probably, that CEO would be asking, when's the next campaign? What's the next ad? What's that look like? Rather than saying, hey, tell me about the conversions on the channel. It's a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, and we are very data driven. So, and as is he, obviously. So yeah, we're very much, we just live in those numbers. So
what's next for FTD?
We want to be that destination you come to for gifting in any sense. We want to be that brand that you think of when, again, those sad and those happy moments in your life where you need to be there for someone. We want to be that person that you think of to go to. So, we're hyper focused on that, both from a product perspective, within our marketing, from customer service. We're looking to really expand our reach when it comes to the different items that we're offering. So, we're just continuing to grow and do well there, and really, really excited for the future and being top of mind when it comes to gifting in a meaningful way.
Okay, I got one last question for you. What's keeping you awake at night? What's the biggest concern that you have, and what are you talking to your team about?
I think it's. I'm going to be honest. I feel like it's this cookieless world that is just keeps hanging over our head and putting fear into everyone. And it keeps me up, but I also am really excited about it because I think kind of like what we chatted about earlier, it kind of gives us a chance to revamp what we're doing and thinking about it in a different way. Yeah. Sort of when like digital marketing became a really important to a brand, like this is another area for us to say, okay, let's test new things and let's see what works. So I'm really trying to empower my team to think that way and not necessarily be afraid of it.
Yeah, because it's okay as a marketer to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. There's no doubt about it. Trust me, when I was the CMO of Eastman Kodak, I made some whopping big mistakes that were, quite frankly, millions of bucks. So you can do that from time to time. It's how you respond and get back. I think with FTD, I know I said last question, but I'm just going to keep going because I'm very interested in this, that I think that it's interesting that you have the ability to help change the mood. Mm-hmm. And that's very unique for a brand, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. And we take that to heart, honestly. And we think about that within the message we're sharing, within the partners that we're choosing to work with. We want to make sure to be there for those important moments. And yeah, it's definitely very important to us.
Well, awesome. Taryn, thanks so much for joining and being a part of All Business right here on C-Suite Radio, C-Suite TV. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
At the end of every show, I like to talk about lessons learned. And today was all about data. You heard her talk about it a few times during the show. And of course, she talked about the softer side of the brand as well, the branding itself and the need for that to put things into the top of the funnel. But really, truly, it's all about the data. And we're going to become more data-driven as business leaders and certainly as marketers as we look for that customer experience and where those behaviors are so that we can capture them to be successful. There's a pony in there somewhere. And that's what I learned right here on All Business with Jeffrey Hayzlett on C-Suite Radio and C-Suite TV.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bestseller TV. I'm Taryn Winterbrill. We're here with Michael Solomon. He is the author of Marketers, Tear Down These Walls, Liberating the Postmodern Consumer. It's great to have you with us, Michael.
Thank you. Great to be here.
The title grabs you, obviously a reference to President Ronald Reagan's speech addressing Gorbachev. How'd you come up with the title?
Well, I wanted to find something that would express this idea that we are really living in a different world today, just as we were at that time.
Sure.
Of course, I'm referring more to the marketing world that we're living in, and the idea that we have erected a lot of walls as we try to understand customers. We love to put them in behind walls. We love to categorize them. And that's the fundamental way that we understand them, and that just doesn't work today.
Right. Categorization's always been sort of the bedrock of marketing, putting customers into these categories.
Right.
And I guess the mantra of your book is that we need to get rid of all that. We need to tear down these walls. That's what the walls refer to, I guess?
Exactly. Those are the walls. We
Okay.
need to get rid of them.
I'd imagine there's so many walls. How did you pick which walls we need to break through, Michael?
Well, I'm going to maybe write about some more walls in the next book. But,
Right.
but I picked a number of really basic walls that we all use in the business as a starting point, and I think these are some of the most important ones that I write about in the book.
Right. And I did want to mention, this is your 12th book?
Yes.
Something like that, you said?
Yeah.
And do they all focus on marketing?
Marketing and consumer behavior. That's
Okay.
my specialty, yeah.
That's a lot of writing. I'm just curious why you're so passionate about marketing.
Well, you know, I'm trained as a psychologist, and I went into marketing many years ago because I'm just fascinated by the everyday activities of people, and when we look at how people define themselves, how they decide who they are, how they interact with others, so much of that relates to consumption, to the consumption choices we make. And so you really can't understand people without understanding the marketplace and how they interact with the marketplace. So that's why I chose to focus on consumer behavior and especially what we call the deep meanings that products have. And it's fascinating that everyday products, not just luxury items and so on, really have very deep meanings. The reasons that we consume products and services, often we're not even aware of those meanings, but they still have a profound impact on our behavior.
And you currently teach marketing?
I do. I'm a marketing professor at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia.
Ah, terrific. I mean, you must have seen it all in terms of the gamut of how marketing and these categories have changed over the years with the advent of online and the internet.
Yeah.
How would you describe it?
Well, I don't think the internet is a fad anymore.
No. It's here to stay.
It's had a profound impact on almost everything that we do, both good and bad. It's a very disruptive influence, and it for one, has had an amazing impact on how we think about ourselves. And the way that we interact with technology really has changed behaviors. And, you know, just walking around on the streets and looking at the number of times that people stop on the street to take a selfie or to look at themselves in their phones.
That drives me nuts, by the way. I don't know about you.
Me too.
Narcissism is out of control, and I just don't get it.
It's out of control. But what it tells you is that people are constantly, if you will, literally taking pictures of themselves, but also in here, we're taking pictures of ourselves. That is, we're saying, who am I now? And the way we answer that question is often by the products that we use. So research with consumers, and if I ask you a basic question, which might be, "Who are you?" Tell me about yourself.
Right.
So many times, what people will start with is, "Well, I am a user of XYZ brands."
Right. That's interesting. That's pretty much common to, that's the first thing people say, "I use these brands"?
It's often up there, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. When you ask people, how do you like to spend your time? What's important to you? How do you identify with other people? Very often, the affiliations that we form are based on common usage of brands. You and I are both Harley owners, so we have a bond that's very difficult to break.
I love this idea, Michael, of how categories no longer exist, because it's true. There used to be a time or a place in time where you dressed a certain way. Oh, I'm a conservative dresser, or this type of dresser. But every day of the week, we can wear a different hat and be a different person. Which there's so much variety now, which I guess goes to your point of you can't really put us in a specific category because we're all becoming hybrids, I guess. Would you say the main reason is because of the internet and everything's become digital?
Well, that's definitely a contributing factor. I call it, in the book, I call it the chameleon consumer. We never know every day who we're going to be.
Right.
Which is interesting, but also a challenge.
For marketers.
For marketers, it's a huge challenge. And so, obviously, the internet is driving that, but our culture in general is on fast forward, and we have access to so many other lifestyle alternatives that we didn't used to know about. And so people are eager to experiment, and one reason I talk about the so-called postmodern consumer, what that means is that, it's a consumer who no longer is thinking in terms of strict categories. So modernism is about categories. When you look at architecture, you talk about buildings that are very solid and square and so on. Postmodern buildings are more fluid, and they're just more interesting, I guess. So, there's an ancient Chinese curse that says, "May you live in interesting times." That's a curse.
That's a curse.
That's a curse.
As opposed to not interesting times?
Because it means that every day things are interesting in the sense that we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And again, for marketers, we're living in interesting times because we no longer have this assurance or this maybe arrogance that we can just understand our customers because we've classified them as, let's say, a 25 to 35-year-old woman living in a city. That no longer really has any value. I
did want to tear through some of these walls that are mentioned in the book. Obviously, we can't get to all of them, and we don't want to because we want people to dive into the book. But you mentioned male versus female. Those categories no longer exist in a marketing or from a marketing perspective?
Well, the categories no longer exist from a societal perspective and therefore from a marketing perspective. We have this tremendous turbulence going on, as everyone knows, when we're talking about what it means to be male or female or something else. And so, we have this term gender binarism.
Right.
And what that means is that you are either male or female, and yet so much of what's going on in our culture and so much of what's going on in people's lives, at least for many people who no longer choose to categorize themselves that way, tells us that category is probably obsolete. And we even have states where on your driver's license you no longer have to declare whether you're male or female. And this creates both challenges and opportunities because we can no longer talk about what men like or what women like or what it means to be a man or a woman. There's so much that's going on that's in flux. And, people, I think, are, if not confused, they're certainly questioning a lot of this. And if they're questioning it, marketers who create the products that they're going to want to define themselves as male or female certainly have to question it.
Why do we need to get rid of the male-female category? And why can't we just add the unigender category?
Well, we can't just add a category because it seems like it's more of a continuum. In other words, there's a lot of fluidity. There's what I've seen is a lot of people who are saying, I'm somewhere in between. I'm not necessarily androgynous. I'm not necessarily male or female. And so what we find, and we find this in research as well, there are ways to measure what we call androgyny, which is a combination of male and female traits.
Right.
And you find that it's not binary. Hardly anything in the social sciences is binary. It might be in the physical sciences. But when you're studying people, it's not a yes or no, black or white.
Okay.
Even though our minds want to put us into categories and say yes or no, black or white, that doesn't correspond to the reality.
Right. But that said, are you saying that that androgynous group is now the majority, more than traditional male, female categories?
Well, it's certainly a growing sector, and it's certainly one that is kind of punching above its weight in terms of its impact on the culture. When we look at, for example, transgender fashions and TV shows, we have transgender actors.
Right.
Fashion magazines are including transgender models. We have a tremendous amount of, and of course the whole gay and lesbian movement, which is gaining steam and getting more powerful every day. So there's so much going on in the culture that just to try to assign it to A or B doesn't make any sense.
In the courses that you teach, how often do you have to change your course load and
well, I'll
the
tell
textbooks
you,
you're using, I guess?
I happen to write the textbooks that I use, and I have to update them every 2 years.
Okay. I thought you were going to say every 2 minutes.
Well, that's what my publisher wants, but...
Right, which it might be coming to that. You have some interesting titles in the book that grab you. Something called The Rise of the Hive Mind, and that falls under the me versus we wall to break down. What do you mean by that?
Well, what I see, and when I talk to my students, this comes out as well. The fundamental way that we make decisions about what to buy is changing, and we've tracked this for many years. That people go through a set of steps when they decide. Many purchases, not all, are a process. Not just you wake up one day and you buy a blouse. You go through a process. Mm-hmm. And that process usually culminates with getting some kind of feedback from others about how you did. Do you like this or should I return it?
Right.
And what we're seeing today is that there's a really, really important change there that marketers need to understand, and that is that feedback that we're asking for is coming much, much earlier in the process. What I find is that in many cases, we're making decisions even about what to order on a menu, certainly what to buy in a store, based on what our network tells us. So people are checking in with their BFFs. They're checking in online. They're taking pictures of let's say a garment before they buy it rather than after, and saying, "What do you guys think? Is this something that would look good on me?" And therefore, what's happening is, the reason I call it a hive mind is that we are basically plugging into this collective that we call the internet, that we call all the bloggers and all of the Facebook posts and all the other things on social media. We're basically tapping into that and getting that feedback before we buy rather than after.
Right, it's tapping into this sort of constant immersion of social media.
Right.
So how does the process change then, and you as a marketer, what do you do to adapt to that?
Well, you have to be aware. For example, if you're a retailer, you have to understand that if you have a bricks and mortar store, if you're still one of those people.
Right. Who? What did you say? How do you pronounce that?
When someone walks into your store, they often know what they're going to buy at that moment, before they've walked in.
Very interesting point.
So if you're waiting for them to walk in and then you're going to do your usual sales stuff to get them to buy this, that's probably not a very good idea.
Right.
You need to insert yourself into the process well before that. So you need to start injecting yourself into the conversation at the point where people are accessing that information, and that's when they're online, when they're looking at what the bloggers say, when they're looking at what their Facebook network says. So you really need to move what Google calls this the zero moment of truth.
Right, the ZMOT.
The ZMOT, yes. And the ZMOT used to be at the end, but now it's much, much closer to the beginning. So I tell people, here's a good trivia question for you if you're ever at a cocktail party. We know that Google is the biggest search engine in the world, but what's the second biggest search engine? And the answer is YouTube. So what that means is that people are not just looking at funny cat videos. What they're doing is when they want to buy something, a home theater system, a new blouse, whatever, a vacation, they are actually typing it into YouTube as well and bringing up videos of everyday people who are talking about the vacation that they went on.
Right. Yeah, there's so many different just avenues right now, but it really runs the gamut in terms of marketing. Obviously, we mentioned garments and clothing, but food. People are going into a restaurant knowing what they want to order ahead of time because they've seen the videos and the pictures on social media and seeing the suggestions and how to order it and what not to do, and even sometimes secret things off the menu.
Right,
so
exactly.
It's really, the game is evolving moment to moment, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I'd imagine that you must be ecstatic because this is your your focus and your specialty.
And I should point out, not only are they finding out what they want to order beforehand, when the dish comes to the table, they're carefully taking a photo of it and posting it, and then they're allowed to eat. So, the whole thing is being captured on film, and so we're becoming much more public. And so, again, this wall that I refer to in the book, me versus we, has largely gone away because for so many hours of our day, at least for a lot of people, they are on camera.
Right. It's never ending. Constant surveillance.
Constant surveillance.
There's 7 walls, right, in the book?
Yes.
Lucky number 7. They're terrific. And I feel like when I was reading it, it's stuff that I know about, but seeing it in writing puts it in a different perspective. So bravo. And I can't wait for book number 13 because there are more walls to break down.
There's plenty of walls. No shortage of walls.
We can't wait for more walls. Thank you for being here, Michael.
Thank you.
If you'd like more information on the book and the walls, just check out our website. It's c-suitebookclub.com, c-suitebookclub.com. I'm Taryn Winterbrill. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time right here on Bestseller TV.
Welcome to C-Suite TV Insights. I'm Greg Greenberg. Necessity, they say, is the mother of invention. Spotting that necessity, however, and then turning it into a product and getting it to market, well, that's the definition of entrepreneurship. Larry Walters, CEO of Steady Straps, is here to discuss how he turned a need to prevent dropped phones into a flourishing business. Welcome, Larry.
Thanks, Greg. Great to be here.
Well, it's good to have you. What were you doing before Steady Straps?
Well, I was involved in a number of opportunities. I started my career practicing law and spent 30 years in law and business. I worked for a law firm when I first got out of law school, had my own law firm for a while. And then I rose up to become general counsel for a world-leading manufacturing company for many years in the air and water filtration space. And then after that, I served as CEO for 3 early-stage companies in coaching, franchising, and medtech, all prior to starting Steady Straps.
And then the idea for Steady Straps popped into your head. How did Steady Straps come about?
Yeah, exactly. I was dropping my phone all the time and kicking it across the floor. And I said, boy, there has got to be a better way to hold this thing. So as you said, this idea literally popped in my head. It was fully formed. It was clear and simple. I call it a God-given idea. I said, what if I just wrap some elastic around my case, put some Velcro on it? Maybe that'll help me hold my phone better. So I went to Joann Fabrics, which is a big fabric store here in Connecticut. $5 later, I came back with some material. My wife helped me stitch together. And it worked well. And it was exciting. It was like Doc Brown in Back to the Future. I invented something that works. So we made some for the family, and our daughter's now down in Brooklyn. She's going to Brooklyn College. And she calls me up one day and she says, Dad, this strap thing, you have got to do something with this. I'm on the subway. I don't feel like people are going to steal the phone out of my hand. And of course, no one's dropping it. So I said, well, maybe this is something that's not just a fun product. Maybe it really could be a business. So I decided to turn it into a business, and here we are.
So you have the product, but you need a team to take it to market. How'd you put your team together?
We started slow. We made some changes along the way. Took us about a year to put our proprietary supply chain together. And first couple of years, we had to work out some manufacturing issues. And now we have a very smooth and streamlined operation. We have a lot of control over the product. I'm a stickler for product quality, so that's really important to us. We have a great team that we work with. We have a graphic artist who's a recent graduate from art school. She does all of our consumer designs as well as our B2B logos. We have a specialized dye sublimation printer who specializes in printing on narrow flat elastics. And then we do all our assembly in-house. We get our elastic in long lengths. We manually cut it with a hot knife. We stitch it, we card it, we fulfill it all here. And we also have 2 college students that help us with our social media. And we use outside professional talent as the need arises.
So you have the product, you have the team. So how do you get Steady Straps to the public? Talk about your marketing plan.
You know, that's obviously a really challenging area. You know, we started with informational B2B website initially to launch our promotional business. We felt that going to businesses and organizations and showing them the value of our strap for promotional purposes was really the right way to launch rather than going to the consumer market. So that's where we started, and we do that primarily through our website. We've got a business model that I think is really compelling. We then decided during COVID, and since the B2B side was so slow, to really launch into the consumer side. So that was our impetus to do that. We set up an e-commerce site, which is what you see now when you go to steadystraps.com. And we have about 75 designs there, more coming. And also we have our straps in a local retail store here and in another online channel as well.
So of all the challenges you faced, what was the biggest challenge you had to overcome, and how'd you do it?
The biggest challenge we faced was really moving from the prototype stage to manufacturing a commercial product. Our first challenge was really to work on that prototype, get it right, and then get it optimized for smartphones. We needed to source a quality elastic. We need to make sure that we work with our specialized dye sublimation printer, who, by the way, does a great job with narrow flat elastics, but also to get those graphics and get them right on the strap. And then also our second challenge really was marketing. We do primarily online marketing, so we're working with our internal team as well as using outside professionals.
And then finally, what's your biggest advice for entrepreneurs after going through the creation of the product all the way to market for Steady Straps?
Well, you know, being in your own business and being an entrepreneur is certainly not for the faint of heart. But if you're passionate about an idea, you've got a product or service that you think is just the right thing, it's going to really help the world, I would say go for it. It's a fun thing. You're going to work harder than you do for a job, but it's rewarding. I really enjoy it, and I think most entrepreneurs really love that challenge as well. And I think also, you know, be flexible. You know, you're probably going to have to change your idea several times to really optimize. That's called pivoting. You really want to get the right product or service that meets the market. Be flexible, have faith in yourself, and go for it.
All right, well, thanks a lot for coming on and speaking about it. And thank you for watching C-Suite TV Insights. I'm Greg Greenberg.